At St. Catherine's Private Hospital, Lagos, mornings didn't begin with the sun. They began with Dr. Vivian Adebayo. By 6:45 a.m., the hospital already felt her presence, even before she stepped in. Nurses adjusted their uniforms properly. Interns suddenly remembered their textbooks. Even the ever-busy cleaners moved with a little more urgency. Then, click, click, click. Her heels announced her arrival. Vivian walked through the glass doors like someone who had no time for nonsense and no patience for excuses. Her white coat was crisp, perfectly ironed, her hair neatly packed into a low bun that didn't dare misbehave. The receptionist whispered to a colleague, "Dr. V. Don Land, everybody behave." Vivian didn't stop walking. "Good morning, doctor," a nurse greeted. Vivian nodded. "Morning. If it's truly good, we'll confirm after ward rounds." That was her. Straight, sharp, efficient. But not heartless. Never that. The reputation. In Lagos, where private hospitals often balanced between saving lives and chasing payments, Vivian had built a name that stood firm. She didn't cut corners. She didn't entertain laziness. And she definitely didn't tolerate emotional blackmail. Her most famous line, "This is a hospital, not a charity organization." Some people feared her because of it. Others respected her deeply. But those who worked closely with her knew something different. She cared, deeply. She just didn't show it the way people expected. Ward round Wahala. That morning, ward rounds started like a military operation. "Patient in bed 3, Vivian said, flipping through a file. A junior doctor stepped forward nervously. She's responding well to treatment." "Vitals?" Vivian cut in. "Stable." "Numbers?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. The young doctor froze. Vivian sighed. "If stable was enough, we would replace doctors with motivational speakers." A few nurses suppressed laughter. She moved on quickly. At bed 5, an elderly man smiled weakly at her. "Doctor, I dreamt I was in heaven yesterday." Vivian didn't miss a beat. "And they sent you back? That means your bill is not complete yet." The man burst into laughter, clutching his chest. "Ah, doctor, you will not kill me with joke." Vivian allowed herself a small smile. That was her secret weapon, humor, sharp and unexpected. It kept fear away, it gave patience strength. Behind the toughness. After rounds, Vivian returned to her office. The space reflected her personality, clean, controlled, elegant. Soft beige walls, minimalist furniture, a sleek glass desk, gold-accented shelves holding medical journals and awards. On the wall behind her sat a framed quote, "Discipline saves more lives than emotion." She sank into her chair, exhaling slowly. For a brief moment, the strict doctor mask faded. Her eyes lingered on a file she wasn't reading. A memory flickered. Years ago, a patient, a delay, no deposit, arguments, policies. It was too late. That day had shaped her, built her rule, hardened her heart, just enough to survive the system. Vivian shook her head slightly, snapping herself back to the present. "No distractions," she murmured. The staff's perspective. Outside her office, 2 nurses whispered. "I heard she once paid for a patient secretly," one said. "Lie," the other replied immediately. "That one, she will first calculate interest before helping you." They both giggled. Just then, Vivian's door opened. "Since both of you have finished gossiping," she said calmly, "you can now go and check if bed 2 is still alive." The nurses scattered instantly. As they rushed off, one whispered, "I swear she hears everything, even our thoughts." Principles written in stone. Vivian sat back down, tapping her pen lightly against the desk. Her rules were simple. No shortcuts, no negligence, no treatment without financial accountability. Because she had seen what happened when hospitals became too emotional. Debts piled up, resources dried out. More lives were lost in the long run. To her, discipline wasn't cruelty, it was survival. The calm before the storm. The hospital settled into its usual rhythm. Monitors beeped steadily. Phones rang occasionally. Footsteps echoed along polished floors. Vivian finally picked up her coffee. Cold. She sighed. Of course. Just as she was about to take a sip anyway, bang! The emergency doors burst open. A scream followed. "Doctor, please help him." Vivian froze for half a second, then slowly placed the cup down. Her expression changed. Sharp, focused, unshakable. "Emergency," she said under her breath, already standing. And just like that, the day that would change everything had begun. The sky over Lagos had turned restless. Dark clouds gathered like they were planning something. The air was heavy, thick, almost suffocating. Even the usual evening noise, honking cars, shouting hawkers, distant music, felt muted. Inside St. Catherine's private hospital, things were calm. Too calm. Vivian sat in her office, glasses resting low on her nose as she reviewed a complicated surgical report. A soft instrumental track played faintly from her phone. For once, no interruptions. She exhaled. "Peace in this hospital? Something is wrong," she muttered. As if on cue, bang! The emergency doors slammed open so hard they echoed through the building. A chaotic rush of footsteps followed. "Help! Somebody help!" Vivian didn't hesitate. Her chair pushed back sharply as she stood. By the time she stepped into the hallway, nurses were already running toward the emergency unit. And then she saw them. A woman, dust-covered, breathless, eyes wide with fear, struggled to hold up a teenage boy whose body looked lifeless. Not unconscious, not sleeping, fading. Blood stained his shirt. His face was swollen beyond recognition. His hair was clotted with dried and fresh blood. Vivian's heartbeat kicked up, but her face stayed calm, professional, controlled. "What happened?" she asked, already moving closer. I found him on the roadside," the woman stammered. "They beat him. I think kidnappers. Please, doctor, save him." Vivian dropped to one knee beside the boy. Her fingers moved quickly, checking pulse. Weak, too weak. She leaned closer. Breathing? Shallow, irregular. Her voice snapped into command mode. "Head trauma. Possible intracranial bleeding." She stood up instantly. "Get a stretcher. Alert theater. Now." Everything exploded into motion. The question that changed everything. As nurses rushed to lift the boy, Vivian turned sharply to the woman. Her eyes were serious now, focused. "Deposit?" she asked. The word hung in the air like a heavy weight. The woman blinked, confused. I don't have money," she said, shaking her head quickly. "He's not my child. I just found him there. I couldn't leave him to die." The nurses slowed. One exchanged a look with another. Everyone knew what this meant. Vivian's rule. No deposit, no surgery. Vivian's jaw tightened slightly. Her mind was already calculating. Emergency surgery, high risk, expensive resources, uncertain outcome, and no guarantee anyone would pay. She glanced at the boy again. His chest struggled to rise. Each breath looked like a fight. Time was slipping through their fingers. The internal battle. For a brief moment, everything slowed. The noise faded. The hospital disappeared. It was just Vivian. And a memory. A similar night. A similar patient. A delay. Arguments over payment. Policies. Rules. By the time they acted, flatline. She blinked hard, pushing the memory away. "No," she whispered under her breath. But her training pushed back. Hospitals collapse without structure. Emotion can destroy systems. Her eyes returned to the boy. Another weak breath. Another second lost. The decision. Vivian straightened. Her voice came out sharp. "Move him." The nurses froze. "Doctor," one said cautiously, "there's no deposit." Vivian turned slowly. Her gaze alone was enough to silence the room. "If he dies," she said calmly, "will you use deposit to bring him back?" No one answered. She removed her wristwatch, a sleek, expensive piece, and handed it to the nearest nurse. "Record it. Emergency override. His bill goes to me." Gasps. Real, audible gasps. Even the woman who brought the boy covered her mouth. One nurse whispered under her breath, "Jesus, Dr. Vivian don't change overnight. Another added quietly, "This boy better wake up, because this bill fit buy small car." Vivian shot them a look. "If I hear one more comment, I will add your names as co-sponsors." Silence. Immediate, controlled chaos. The stretcher rolled in. The boy was transferred quickly. "Careful, support his head," Vivian ordered. As they rushed toward the theater, Vivian walked beside them, issuing rapid instructions. "Prepare for emergency craniotomy. Get blood ready. O negative if we can't confirm. Call anesthesiology. Tell them it's critical." Her voice was calm, but urgent. Every step echoed through the hallway. The woman stood frozen, watching them disappear. Tears streamed down her face. "God bless you, doctor," she whispered. At the theater doors, just before entering, Vivian paused. She looked at the boy one more time. For a split second, something softened in her eyes. "Don't die on me," she murmured quietly. Then just like that, the mask returned, professional, unshakable. She pushed the theater doors open. Inside the storm, bright lights, cold air, machines beeping. The surgical team moved into position. Vivian scrubbed in quickly, her mind now completely locked in. No emotions, no doubts, only precision. As she stepped up to the table, she looked at her team. "Listen carefully," she said. "This is not just another surgery. This is a race against time." She picked up the scalpel. Steady hands, sharp eyes. "Let's bring him back." And outside, the storm finally broke. Rain poured heavily against the hospital windows, as if the heavens themselves were watching, waiting to see if one decision would change everything. The operating theater was a world of its own. Cold, bright, unforgiving. The overhead surgical lights cast a sharp glow on the boy's fragile body, turning every drop of blood into something almost too real to ignore. But Vivian didn't see fear. She saw a problem to solve. "The setup. Vitals?" Vivian asked, her hands steady as she adjusted her gloves. The anesthesiologist glanced at the monitor. Pulse weak, blood pressure dropping, oxygen unstable. Vivian nodded once. "Stabilize him. I need him alive long enough to save him." One nurse quickly whispered to another, "This kind case, not God and Dr. Vivian partnership go handle am." The other replied softly, "And God go say, Vivian, you first." Vivian didn't look up. "I can still hear both of you," she said dryly. Silence. The first cut. The room went still. Vivian stretched out her hand. Scalpel. It was placed into her palm instantly. She leaned in slightly, eyes sharp, completely locked on her target. "Focus," she said, not just to them, to herself. Then, the first incision. Precise, clean, no hesitation. The monitor beeped steadily in the background. For a few minutes, everything flowed, controlled, methodical. Then, "Doctor," a nurse said quietly. Vivian didn't look up. "Talk to me. His BP is falling." The beeping changed rhythm. Slightly faster, slightly weaker. Pressure rising. "More suction," Vivian ordered. Blood pooled faster than expected. Her eyes narrowed. "Internal bleeding is worse than we thought." She moved quicker now, but never careless. "Clamp. Gauze. Keep the field clear." Sweat formed on her forehead, but she ignored it. Another update came. "Doctor, heart rate dropping." The monitor's sound shifted again. This time, it was dangerous. The edge of losing him. For a brief second, everything felt like it was slipping. The boy's body twitched slightly. The machine let out a warning tone. One long, unsettling sound. "Doctor." "Not yet," Vivian snapped. Her voice cut through panic like a blade. "Increase oxygen. Push fluids. Now." The anesthesiologist moved quickly. "Trying." Vivian's hands moved faster now, but still controlled. Inside her head, a storm. Not again. Not another one. Not on my table. The memory from years ago tried to creep back in. That lifeless stillness. That silence. That failure. She shut it down instantly. "No," she muttered, fighting back. "Stay with me," she said under her breath, almost like she was speaking directly to the boy's soul. Her movements became sharper, more decisive. She located the source of bleeding. "There you are," she whispered. "Clamp." A nurse passed it quickly. Vivian secured it. Good, good. The bleeding slowed, slightly, but not enough. "Doctor, he's crashing," someone said. The monitor spiked wildly, then dropped. The moment everything stopped, a long, continuous tone filled the room, flat, cold, terrifying. One nurse gasped, "Doctor." Time froze. Just for a second, Vivian stared at the monitor, then at the boy. She stepped back slightly, removed her hands. The room held its breath. Then she spoke, calm, firm, unshaken. "Charge." The defibrillator was brought instantly. Clear. The shock hit. The boy's body jerked. Nothing. Again. Clear. Another shock. Still nothing. A nurse whispered, almost in fear, "Doctor." Vivian's eyes hardened. "We are not losing him." Refusal to lose. She stepped in again. "Continue compressions. Prepare adrenaline." Her voice was steady, but underneath it was something stronger than protocol. Determination. "Listen to me," she said quietly, almost like a command to life itself. "You didn't survive kidnappers to die here. Not on my table. Not today. Adrenaline ready. Push it." Seconds passed, heavy, painful. Then a sound. Beep. Soft, uncertain. Everyone froze. Then beep, beep. Stronger, steady. The monitor came back to life. The turning point. The entire room exhaled at once. One nurse nearly laughed in disbelief. "Ha! This boy gets strong head-o." Another whispered, "He no one leave Lagos." Vivian didn't smile. "Not yet." "Focus," she said again. "We're not done." But something had changed. The danger had shifted. The boy was fighting now. And Vivian, she was winning. The final stretch. Minutes turned into another hour. The bleeding was controlled. The pressure stabilized. Every step forward felt like pulling someone out of deep water. Slow, exhausting, but worth it. Finally, Vivian stepped back. "Close." Her voice was calm again. Normal. The storm had passed. After the war. She removed her gloves slowly, dropped them into the bin. The room was quiet now. Peaceful. The kind of silence that only comes after chaos. She looked at the boy one last time. Machine steady. Breathing supported. Alive. "He'll make it," she said, not loud, but certain. One nurse smiled. "Doctor, you too much." Vivian picked up her wristwatch from a tray nearby and wore it, then replied casually, "I know, but don't tell me. I might increase my consultation fee." The room burst into relieved laughter. Outside the theater, Vivian pushed the doors open and stepped out. The rain was still pouring heavily outside. The woman who brought the boy rushed forward immediately. "Doctor?" Vivian looked at her, exhausted, but composed. "He's alive." The woman broke down instantly, tears flowing freely. "God bless you. God bless you." Vivian nodded slightly, then added, "Next time, if you see trouble on the road." She paused. "Still stop. People like you are rare." The woman cried even harder. Vivian turned and walked away slowly. Her steps were steady, but deep inside, she knew something had shifted. That decision, that risk, that moment in the theater, it had broken something in her. Or maybe it had awakened it. The rain had not slowed. If anything, it came down harder. Heavy drops slamming against the hospital's glass panels like impatient fists. Inside St. Catherine's private hospital, the tension hadn't settled either. Dr. Vivian had barely stepped out of surgery when the next storm arrived. Not from the sky, from the front desk. Two police officers stood at the reception, uniforms slightly damp from the rain, boots leaving faint wet prints on the polished floor. Their presence alone shifted the atmosphere. Patients whispered. Nurses exchanged looks. One officer, tall, stern-faced, leaned over the counter. "Who is the doctor in charge here?" he demanded. The receptionist pointed nervously down the hallway. Dr. Vivian. "Call her." Vivian steps in. Vivian walked in calmly, removing her surgical cap as she approached. Her face showed no stress, no fear, just controlled curiosity. "You're looking for me?" she asked. The officer turned sharply. "Yes. Are you the one who performed surgery on that unidentified boy?" Vivian folded her arms lightly. "I prefer the doctor who saved his life, but yes." A nurse nearby almost choked trying to hold back laughter. The accusation. The second officer stepped forward. You were supposed to wait for police clearance before proceeding. This is a suspected kidnapping case. Vivian raised an eyebrow. Oh, should I also wait for traffic clearance next time? The officer frowned. Doctor, this is serious. Vivian nodded. I agree. Brain hemorrhage is very serious. That's why I didn't wait. A few staff members quietly turned away, pretending to be busy just so they could laugh freely. Clash of authority. The first officer's tone hardened. You went against procedure. Vivian stepped closer, just enough to make a point. And you want me to go against life? Silence. She continued, her voice calm but firm. Tell me, officer, if it was your child lying there bleeding, would you ask me to fill forms first? The officer hesitated. Just for a second. That was enough. The subtle victory. Vivian didn't raise her voice, she didn't argue loudly, she simply held her ground, with logic sharper than any weapon. The second officer cleared his throat. We understand, but next time, there might not be a next time, Vivian cut in gently, because next time, the patient might not survive the delay. That landed. Hard. Hospital side commentary. Behind them, two nurses whispered. This police no say Dr. Vivian the lawyer joined doctor, one said. The other replied, she fit argue case for Supreme Court and still do surgery. Vivian didn't turn, but her lips twitched slightly. She heard them. Of course she did. The twist begins. Just then, one of the officer's phones rang. He stepped aside to answer. Yes, sir. Yes, we found him. Alive. Yes, sir. At St. Catherine's. Vivian's ears picked up the shift immediately. The officer's posture changed. More respectful. More alert. We're with the doctor now. He ended the call slowly. Then turned to Vivian. This boy. He's not just anyone. Vivian tilted her head slightly. I assumed he was human. That was enough for me. The nurse behind her almost burst out laughing again. The revelation. The officer continued. He was reported missing a week ago. Kidnapping case. His father is a very powerful man. Vivian shrugged lightly. Power didn't stop him from bleeding. The officer ignored the comment and continued. Has on his way here now. The mood shift. That one statement changed everything. The reception area grew quieter. Staff straightened unconsciously. Even the air felt different. One nurse whispered, Omo, big man go soon land. Another added, make nobody talk anyhow, oh. Vivian, however, remained exactly the same. Unmoved, unimpressed. Vivian stand. She turned to the officers. If you're done questioning me, I have patients to attend to. The first officer looked slightly taken aback. That's all? Vivian nodded. Yes, unless you want me to operate on you too. The second officer coughed, trying not to smile. No, doctor, that won't be necessary. Exit with style. Vivian turned and began walking away. Then paused briefly. Without turning back, she added, Next time you come here, come with thank you, not complaint. And just like that, she left. The moment she disappeared down the hallway, the tension broke. One nurse clapped softly. Dr. Vivian no day disappoint. Another said, if confidence was money, that woman go be trillionaire. The officers exchanged glances. Even they couldn't deny it. She wasn't just bold. She was right. The calm before the next arrival. Outside, the sound of engines began to rise. Low, powerful. Multiple vehicles approaching at once. Inside the hospital, heads turned toward the entrance. The officers straightened instantly. One muttered under his breath, Has here. And somewhere down the hallway, Vivian adjusted her coat slightly, unaware, or maybe completely aware, that the next person she was about to meet would change her life in a way no surgery ever could. The rain softened, but the tension didn't. If anything, it grew thicker. Outside St. Catherine's private hospital, a convoy of black SUVs rolled in with quiet authority. Not loud, not chaotic, just powerful. The kind of entrance that didn't need noise to command attention. Inside, everything shifted. The receptionist adjusted her hair. A nurse quickly tucked in her shirt. Another whispered, Omo, this one no be small person, oh. The entrance, The glass door slid open, and he walked in. Mr. Alexander Cole. Tall, dark, impeccably dressed in a tailored charcoal suit that looked like it had never known stress. His shoes barely made a sound on the polished floor, but somehow every step felt heavy with presence. 2 security men followed behind him, but they were invisible, because all eyes were on him. His face was calm, but his eyes, restless, searching, demanding answers. The first words, "Where is my son?" His voice was deep, controlled, but underneath it, urgency. The room froze. The police officer stepped forward immediately. "Sir, where is he?" Alexander repeated, sharper this time. "No greetings, no formalities, just a father." Vivian enters. From the hallway, Vivian walked in. Same calm stride, same composed face. No attempt to impress, no attempt to shrink. She stopped a few steps away from him. "You're welcome," she said simply. That caught him off guard. Most people either fawned over him or feared him. She did neither. "He's stable," she added. A moment of stillness. Alexander blinked. "Stable?" Vivian nodded. "Yes, severe head trauma, internal bleeding, but we intervened in time." The words hit him slowly. Stable, alive, not gone. He exhaled, a breath he didn't even realize he had been holding. For a brief second, the billionaire disappeared, and a father stood there instead. He stepped closer. "You handled the surgery?" Vivian folded her arms lightly. "I did." A pause. Then, without waiting for police clearance, he asked. Vivian tilted her head slightly. "I also didn't wait for permission from death." A faint ripple of suppressed laughter moved through the nurses. Even one of the security men looked down to hide a smile. The shift in power. Alexander studied her now, not as a doctor, but as a person. There was something different about her. Confidence, yes, but not arrogance. Strength, but not harshness. And something else. Integrity. "You took a risk," he said. Vivian shrugged. "I took responsibility." Silence. Then she added casually, "If I waited, you would be planning a burial instead of standing here." The words were blunt, direct, unfiltered. The entire room went still. One nurse whispered under her breath, "Ha, she done tell billionaire truth like say not her mate." The unexpected reaction. Alexander didn't get angry. He didn't shout. Instead, he smiled, small but genuine, and that alone shocked everyone. "Thank you," he said quietly. Not forced, not formal, real. The human side. "Can I see him?" he asked. "Yes," Vivian replied, "but he's still unconscious, and you'll need to stay calm." Alexander gave a slight nod. "I've handled bigger situations." Vivian raised an eyebrow. "Not this one." That landed, and surprisingly, he accepted it. Inside the room, they walked into the private recovery room. Modern, quiet, soft lighting, clean white sheets, machines beeped steadily. The boy lay there, bandaged, still, fragile. Alexander stopped at the door. For the first time, he hesitated, then slowly walked closer. He reached out and gently touched his son's hand. His jaw tightened. Emotion flickered across his face, but he controlled it. "Thank you," he said again, this time without turning back. Vivian stood behind him, silent, respectful. The bill conversation with a twist. After a moment, Alexander turned. "I was told you covered the cost?" Vivian sighed slightly. "Yes, emergency override." He looked at her carefully. "Why?" She met his gaze. "Because at that moment, he wasn't a billionaire's son." She paused. He was just a boy, about to die. Silence. Heavy. Meaningful. The gesture. Alexander reached into his pocket and pulled out a sleek black card. He handed it to her. "My office will settle everything. Double, if necessary." Vivian didn't take it immediately. She looked at the card, then at him, then said, "Relax. I'm not running a promo." A nurse outside almost fainted, trying not to laugh. Vivian finally took the card. "But thank you," she added. The invitation. There was a pause. Then Alexander spoke again. "I'd like to properly thank you." Vivian sighed softly. "If this is where you say anything you want, just name it. I'll disappoint you. I don't need a car." He almost smiled again. Dinner. She blinked. Dinner? Yes. Vivian crossed her arms. You're inviting me to dinner because I did my job? No, he said calmly. I'm inviting you because you're not like anyone I've met. That one landed differently. For the first time, Vivian didn't respond immediately. A hint of something new. She looked at him. Really looked this time. Not as a patient's relative, not as a billionaire, but as a man. Composed, intelligent, observant, and strangely honest. She exhaled lightly. I'll think about it. Alexander nodded. That's enough for now. The exit. As he turned to leave, the entire hospital seemed to breathe again. The tension faded. The whispers returned. One nurse leaned toward another. This one no be ordinary story, oh. The other replied. Now where love story day start be this. Vivian alone. Back in her office, Vivian dropped the black card on her desk. She stared at it, then leaned back in her chair. Dinner? She muttered. She shook her head slightly, but a small, almost invisible smile touched her lips. For someone who believed in rules, life had just introduced her to something unpredictable, and somewhere in the hospital, a boy lay fighting to wake up, unaware that his survival had just connected two worlds that were never meant to meet. Vivian almost didn't go. In fact, she spent most of the evening convincing herself that she shouldn't. Dr. Vivian Ademoye, she muttered, while standing in front of her mirror, adjusting her simple black dress. You that you are always busy saving lives. Now you are going for billionaire dinner like school excursion. She paused, then added firmly, and who will check Ward 4 tomorrow morning? Silence. Her reflection didn't answer. The unexpected curiosity. But something kept pulling at her thoughts. Not money, not status, something quieter. The man's eyes. The sincerity in his voice when he said, "Thank you." She sighed. Vivian, you are thinking too much. Then she grabbed her bag. I will just go, eat food, leave early, no story. Classic Vivian logic. The location. The dinner was at a high-end private restaurant in Victoria Island. One of those places that didn't just serve food, it served experience. From the outside, it looked like a glass palace floating in warm golden light. Inside, pure elegance. Modern Nigerian luxury design, soft ambient lighting, marble floors that reflected chandeliers like water, carved wooden accents inspired by Yoruba patterns, and subtle Afro jazz playing like it understood mood. Even the air smelled expensive. Vivian paused at the entrance. She murmured. So people eat inside palace like this every day? A waiter greeted her immediately. Good evening, Dr. Ademoye. Mr. Cole is expecting you. She raised an eyebrow. Of course he is. Billionaires don't like surprise bills. The waiter blinked, then quickly led her in. The man waiting. Alexander was already seated. No entourage this time, no chaos, just him. Casual dark shirt, no tie, sleeves slightly rolled up, a man trying just slightly to feel human. When he saw her, he stood. You came. Vivian sat down calmly. I said I would think about it. I didn't say I would disappear. A faint smile appeared on his face. I was hoping you wouldn't. She glanced around. This place looks like it was designed to make poor people feel spiritually uncomfortable. He chuckled. It was designed to make people feel appreciated. Vivian nodded. Then it's doing too much. The food and the conversation. Waiters arrived quickly. Plates were placed like artwork, carefully, silently. Vivian looked at her dish. This one is food or museum exhibition. Alexander laughed. Just try it. She took a bite, paused. Okay, this is dangerous. Dangerous how? If I like it too much, I might start calling hospital patients to bring me here instead of paying bills. He smiled wider now. The ice was breaking. Strange, normal conversations. For the first time, Alexander wasn't speaking like a billionaire, and Vivian wasn't speaking like a surgeon. They were just talking. Why medicine? He asked. Vivian shrugged. My father used to say, if you cannot fix people's problems, at least don't become one. He laughed. He also believed laughter is part of treatment. She paused. And I think he was right. Alexander leaned slightly forward. You joke a lot for someone so strict. Vivian raised an eyebrow. And you smile a lot for someone who owns half of Lagos. He smiled. Only when I'm not negotiating oil deals or fighting board members. Sounds stressful. It is. A short silence. Then Vivian added casually, try surgery where someone's life depends on your hands. Stress will humble you. I believe you. The shift in energy. The conversation became smoother, lighter, almost natural. At some point, Alexander asked, what made you break your rule? Vivian leaned back slightly. I didn't break it. He tilted his head. You funded his surgery yourself. Yes, that's breaking it. She looked at him directly. No, that's called decision-making under pressure. Very different thing. He laughed. I see you argue like you operate. Precise and unstoppable. She smirked. And you observe like a businessman who never loses money. He paused. I try not to. A softer truth. The room quieted for a moment. Alexander's expression changed slightly. I almost lost him, he said softly. Vivian's tone softened too. But you didn't. That's because of you. She shook her head. Because of time, because of intervention, because of many factors. He looked at her carefully. You don't like credit, do you? I like accuracy. That made him smile again. The unexpected confession. After a moment, Alexander said, I've met a lot of doctors. Vivian nodded. I'm sure you've met a lot of everything. He continued, but none of them acted like you. She paused. Is that supposed to be a compliment or a complaint? A compliment. Then say it properly. He chuckled. You're different. Vivian leaned forward slightly. That's a lazy compliment. Try again. He shook his head amused. You're impossible. Better. The invitation becomes real. After dessert, Alexander spoke again, more seriously. I want to thank you properly. Vivian sighed. We've already established that dinner is your version of proper. He ignored that. Come with me tomorrow. My company is hosting a private foundation meeting. I want you there. Vivian blinked. Me? At a billionaire foundation meeting? Why? Because you see life differently. She leaned back. That sounds like a trap. It's not. She narrowed her eyes. I don't trust rich people's sentences that include trust me. He laughed. Fair point. The decision point. There was a pause, long enough for both of them to feel it. Then Vivian said, I'll come. Alexander looked slightly surprised. You will? Yes. She picked up her glass. But if anyone tries to turn it into motivational speaking or donation ceremony, I'm leaving. He smiled. Deal. The quiet ending of the night. Outside, Lagos was still alive, cars moving, lights glowing, life continuing. Inside the restaurant, something quieter had begun. Not romance, not yet. Something more subtle. Recognition, understanding, possibility. As Vivian stood to leave, Alexander said softly, Dr. Vivian. She turned slightly. Yes? Thank you. Again. She paused, then replied simply, Don't make me regret saving your son, and walked away. Alexander watched her leave, for a long time, then whispered to himself, This is not just gratitude. He smiled faintly. This is something else. And somewhere in Lagos that night, two lives that never should have crossed had already started changing direction. The next morning in Lagos felt different, not because the city had changed, but because something inside Vivian had shifted, even if she refused to admit it. She woke up earlier than usual, too early. She stared at the ceiling for a moment, then sighed. This is how people start missing work because of billionaire dinner, she muttered. She got up anyway. A different kind of morning. At St. Catherine's private hospital, everything looked normal, but somehow it didn't feel normal to her. Nurses greeted her as usual. Good morning, doctor. Morning, she replied, then paused. Any update on the boy? The nurse smiled. He's improving steadily. He even moved his fingers this morning. Vivian nodded, but something in her expression softened briefly. Good. Just that. But for her, that was a lot. Unexpected distraction. While reviewing files, one of the nurses leaned in slightly. Doctor, that billionaire man called again. Vivian didn't look up. What did he say? He confirmed today's meeting, and he insisted you attend. She sighed. Insisted? Like I'm a missing lab sample? The nurse smiled. He said it politely. Vivian closed the file. Rich people politeness is still pressure. The arrival at the foundation. Later that day, Vivian arrived at Alexander Cole's private foundation headquarters, and for a second, even she paused. The building wasn't just modern, it was intentional. Glass architecture mixed with warm African textures, wooden carvings, soft earth tones, green indoor gardens, and digital screens showing humanitarian projects across Africa. It felt like Lagos, but upgraded. Vivian muttered. So money can behave like this. A staff member greeted her respectfully and led her inside. Alexander appears. Alexander was already in the meeting room, surrounded by executives, but the moment Vivian entered, he stood. Immediately, like the room didn't matter anymore. Dr. Vivian, he said. She nodded. Mr. Cole. He smiled slightly. You came. Vivian folded her arms. I said I would. I don't cancel promises. I cancel nonsense. A few executives blinked. One whispered, she talks to him like he's junior doctor. Another replied, or like she doesn't know he owns half the room. The meeting begins. The discussion was about healthcare funding across Nigeria, rural hospitals, emergency response systems, and trauma care improvements. Vivian listened quietly at first. Then, she interrupted. Sorry. Everyone turned. She leaned forward slightly. You are planning to fund hospitals, but no mention of staffing structure or emergency training. A board member cleared his throat. That will be handled administratively. Vivian nodded slowly. That's how people die, administratively. Silence. Heavy. Uncomfortable. Alexander didn't interrupt. He watched her, interested. Vivian takes control without trying to. She continued. You don't fix healthcare by building buildings. You fix it by fixing response time. She tapped the table lightly. If a child arrives bleeding, your architecture doesn't save him. Your system does. One executive tried to respond. Vivian cut in gently, but firmly. And systems don't run on intentions. They run on trained humans. Silence again. This time, thoughtful. Alexander finally spoke. She's right. That one sentence changed the room. After the meeting, when it ended, executives left with mixed expressions. Some impressed, some unsettled. Vivian remained seated, organizing her notes. You didn't hold back. Vivian didn't look up. I rarely hold back when people are about to waste money and call it progress. He smiled. I noticed. She closed the file. Good. Then you won't waste mine. He chuckled softly. That's a very expensive way of saying you care. Vivian paused slightly, then stood. I don't care. I correct, but she didn't sound as sharp as usual. A walk that changed the tone. Alexander walked her out. The sun outside was softer now, filtering through the glass structures of the building. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Alexander said, You know, most people around me agree with everything I say. Vivian glanced at him. That sounds boring. He laughed. It is. She nodded. Then fire them. He raised an eyebrow. That's your advice? Yes. If people around you are too comfortable, your ideas start rotting. That made him smile again. You really don't know how to be diplomatic. I know. That's why patients survive. The subtle shift. They reached the car park. His driver stood waiting. But Alexander didn't move immediately. Instead, he said, I'm glad my son met you. Vivian replied without hesitation. I'm glad he didn't die. A pause, then softer. Me too. Silence again, but this one felt different. Not empty. Full. The first crack in the wall. As Vivian turned to leave, Alexander said, Dr. Vivian. She stopped. Yes. He hesitated slightly, then said, Can I call you Vivian, outside hospital hours? That question hung in the air longer than expected. Vivian looked at him. Really looked. Not as a patient's relative, not as a billionaire, but as a man trying carefully not to overstep. She adjusted her bag slightly. Don't get used to it. Then walked away. After she left, Alexander stood there watching her leave. A small smile formed. Not loud, not proud, just real. One of his executives approached quietly. Sir, she is not easy to read. Alexander replied calmly. That's exactly why she's interesting. The executive hesitated. Interesting? Alexander nodded slightly. No, more than that. He looked toward where she disappeared. She doesn't move for money. A pause, then added quietly, and that makes her dangerous to my peace. Final moment. Elsewhere in the city, Vivian stepped into her car. She exhaled slowly. For a moment, she stared out the window, then muttered to herself, "This man talks too much for someone I saved once." She shook her head, but her lips betrayed her. A small smile. Lagos didn't care about Vivian's emotional confusion. The city woke up the same way it always did. Honking horns, impatient donfos, roadside sellers shouting prices like negotiations were personal battles. But inside Vivian's mind, everything was slightly off balance. A morning she didn't expect. She arrived at the hospital earlier than usual again. That alone annoyed her. "I need to stop this nonsense," she muttered as she stepped out of her car. A nurse greeted her quickly. "Good morning, doctor." Vivian nodded. "Any emergency overnight?" The nurse hesitated slightly. "No emergency." But the billionaire called again. Vivian stopped walking, slowly turned. "Again?" The nurse nodded. "Yes, doctor. He said it's important." Vivian sighed deeply. This man is becoming a medical condition. The unexpected call. Just as she entered her office, her phone rang. Unknown number. She stared at it for a second, then answered. "Dr. Vivian speaking." A familiar voice came through. Warm, calm, confident. "Good morning, doctor." She rolled her eyes slightly. "I know that voice." A soft laugh. "Good. Then I don't need introduction." She leaned back in her chair. "Mr. Cole, if this is about hospital donations, I already sent my report." "It's not." A pause. Then he added, "I wanted to know if you had breakfast." Vivian blinked. "Excuse me?" "I asked if you had breakfast." She narrowed her eyes. "Is this a medical consultation or personal harassment?" Another laugh. "Just concern." She sat up slightly. Concern from a billionaire is dangerous. It usually comes with contracts. Not this time. Silence. She didn't respond immediately. That irritated her more than she expected. Hospital chaos interrupts feelings. Before she could reply further, "Doctor." A nurse rushed in. "Emergency case from accident on 3rd Mainland Bridge." Vivian stood immediately. All emotional confusion paused. She muttered, "Work first." She hung up the call without ceremony, but for a second, she stared at the phone, then quickly placed it away. The emergency that grounded her. At the ER, everything became sharp again. Focus returned. A young man with severe fractures, blood loss, shock state. Vivian was fully herself again. "Prepare transfusion. Stabilize airway. Call theater." Her voice cut through the chaos like steel. No hesitation, no distraction, just control. One nurse whispered to another, "Dr. Vivian don't come back fully." The other replied, "She never really left. Something just distracted her small." Vivian shot them a look. "Both of you, if you are done analyzing my life, come and hold this IV line properly." Silence, immediate obedience. After the storm of medicine, hours later, the patient stabilized. Vivian removed her gloves, exhaling slowly. Another life held together, another victory. But instead of relief, there was something else. A thought she didn't invite. Alexander. She frowned slightly. "Why am I thinking about this man during surgery?" She shook her head. No. Focus. But her mind didn't fully obey. Unexpected visit. Later that afternoon, he came. Not announced loudly, not dramatic. Just walked in. Alexander Cole. Casual outfit today. No suit. Just a simple black shirt and trousers. Still powerful. Still noticeable. But less distant. Vivian looked up from her desk. "Don't you have meetings or oil to refine or something?" He smiled. "I was nearby." That is not an answer. It is when you want to see someone. A nurse passing by almost dropped a file. Tension that feels different. Vivian leaned back. "If this is about my report again." "It's not." He paused slightly, then added, "I just wanted to see if you were okay." She frowned. "Why wouldn't I be okay?" He shrugged. You sounded distant on the phone. That caught her. She studied him for a moment, then replied more softly, I was busy saving someone's life. I know. A pause. Then quieter. I didn't want to assume I'm only allowed to talk to you when something is wrong with my son. That line landed differently. A crack in the professional wall. Vivian didn't respond immediately. That was rare. She stood up slowly. Mr. Cole. Alexander, he corrected gently. She paused, then sighed. Alexander. A small smile appeared on his face. Progress. Tiny, but real. A walk without purpose. For the first time, Vivian stepped outside the hospital with him. No emergency, no meetings, just walking. Lagos breeze moved lightly around them. Cars passed. Life continued, but their conversation slowed everything else down. You always this stubborn? Alexander asked. Vivian replied instantly, Yes. He smiled. I noticed. Good. Saves time. He chuckled. I think you enjoy arguing. I enjoy correctness. That's a polite way of saying yes. She didn't deny it. Unexpected honesty. After a while, Alexander spoke more quietly. I don't usually do this. Do what? Seek people out like this. Vivian glanced at him. Then stop. It might be a disease. He laughed softly. Maybe. Then became serious again. But I find myself thinking about conversations that shouldn't matter, more than board meetings that should. Vivian slowed slightly. That sounds like stress. He looked at her. Or distraction. Silence. The word hung between them longer than expected. Vivian's defense mechanism failed slightly. She cleared her throat. You're overthinking. Am I? Yes. A pause. Then she added quickly, and I don't do distractions. He nodded. I believe you, but the way he said it suggested he didn't, not fully. The almost moment, they reached the hospital entrance again. Stopping, neither moving immediately. Alexander spoke first. Dr. Vivian, she sighed. If this is another invitation, I will prescribe you rest. He smiled. No, just one question. She crossed her arms. Make it fast. He hesitated slightly, then asked, Do you ever think about things outside saving lives? Vivian didn't answer immediately. That was dangerous territory. Then she replied carefully, I think about efficiency, systems, outcomes. He nodded slowly. That's not what I asked. Silence. Longer this time. Finally, Vivian said quietly, Sometimes. That single word changed the air. The beginning of something unnamed. Alexander didn't push further. He just nodded. Good. She frowned slightly. Good? Yes. For what? He smiled faintly. That means you're human. She rolled her eyes. I was human before you discovered me. Thank you very much. He laughed. Final moment. As he turned to leave, he paused, then said, I'll see you again, Dr. Vivian. She replied quickly, Hopefully in a hospital setting. He smiled. Or maybe somewhere you don't wear a coat. That made her pause, just for a second. Then she said firmly, Don't start what you can't finish. He looked at her, calm, certain. I rarely start anything I don't intend to finish. Then he left. Ending reflection. Vivian stood there watching him go. By the next morning, Vivian had made a decision. A simple one. A necessary one. Distraction is not part of my job description, she told herself while tying her hair. She said it like a medical diagnosis. Final. Irrefutable. But even as she spoke it aloud, something inside her didn't fully agree. The hospital notices. First St. Catherine's Hospital had its own ecosystem of gossip, disguised as clinical observation. By 8:10 a.m., 2 nurses were already whispering near the nurses' station. Dr. Vivian has been smiling small recently. The other gasped. Smile? Dr. Vivian? Yes, I saw it yesterday, like corner of mouth. That one na serious condition, oh. They both laughed, then immediately froze, because Vivian was walking toward them. Morning, she said. Both answered in unison. Good morning, doctor. She paused, looked at them. Why are you both standing like you are hiding a crime? Silence. Immediate. No, doctor. Good, she replied, because if you are hiding anything, I'll prescribe extra night duty. They nodded quickly. Yes, doctor. She walked away. One whispered after she left, "She hears thoughts." The other replied, "Or she is thoughts." The attempt at normal. Vivian threw herself into work harder than usual. Patient reviews, surgery schedules, emergency planning. Anything to drown out the small, persistent thought that kept resurfacing. Alexander. Not his money, not his status, just him. And that irritated her more than anything. The call that should not have mattered. At exactly 11:32 a.m. her phone rang again. Unknown number. She stared at it longer this time before answering. Dr. Vivian. That voice again. Warm, calm, too familiar now. "Good morning," Alexander said. She sighed. "You're becoming a daily infection." He laughed softly. "Good morning to you too. I'm busy." "I know." Pause. Then he added, "I just wanted to confirm something." She leaned back slightly. "If this is about your son, he's stable. If it's about donations, send email. If it's about anything emotional, please consult HR. Another soft laugh. "No." "Then what?" A brief silence. Then, "I just wanted to know if you had lunch plans." Vivian blinked. "Excuse me? I asked if you had lunch plans." She straightened. "Are you tracking my meals now?" "No, I'm trying to avoid guessing wrong." That made her pause. Just slightly. The dangerous invitation. "I'm not free," she said quickly. "I didn't ask if you were free," he replied. "I'm not interested in whatever this is." A pause. Then his voice softened slightly. "I didn't define it." That irritated her more. "Good. Don't." Another pause. Then, "I'll be at Orchid Bistro at 2, he said calmly, "if you change your mind." She scoffed. "I won't." "Okay." And the line ended. Just like that. No pressure. No argument. That somehow made it worse. Vivian's inner argument. She stared at her phone for a long time, then muttered, "This man thinks life is a romantic comedy. Are you okay?" Vivian answered instantly. "Yes, I am clinically fine, emotionally unavailable, spiritually unbothered." The nurse nodded slowly. "Okay, doctor." But Vivian didn't move for a moment. That lunch invitation sat in her mind like a diagnosis she refused to acknowledge. The breaking point. 2:07 p.m. She didn't plan to go. She really didn't. But at 2:07 p.m., she found herself sitting in her office, staring at a file, without reading a single word of it. She closed it, opened it again. Closed it again. Finally. Tsk. She stood up. Just to prove a point, she said to herself. Nothing more. Orchid Bistro. The restaurant was calm. Soft lighting. Elegant modern Nigerian interior design. Glass walls. Warm wooden accents. Green indoor plants. And quiet Afro jazz music blending into the atmosphere like it belonged there. Not loud luxury. Controlled luxury. The kind that whispered, "You are important enough to sit here." Alexander was already there. Of course he was. He stood when she arrived. "You came." Vivian didn't sit immediately. "I came to prove you wrong," she said. He smiled. "That's still coming." She sat. "Don't get used to it." "I won't." Pause. Then he added, "But I will enjoy it." She rolled her eyes. The unexpected calm. Unlike the hospital, unlike meetings, unlike tension-filled conversations, this felt different. Less performance, more presence. He didn't talk about business. She didn't talk about surgery. For a while, there was just food and silence that didn't feel uncomfortable. Then Vivian said, "You always this free during the day?" He shrugged. "I make time." "For what?" He looked at her. "For things that matter." She scoffed lightly. "That sounds like something people say before wasting time." He smiled. "Maybe." A crack in the pattern. She studied him for a moment, then asked, "Why me?" Simple question. Dangerous question. He didn't answer immediately. He leaned back slightly, then said honestly, "Because you don't try to impress me." That surprised her. She frowned. "That's not a reason." "It is to me." Silence. Vivian pushes back. "I'm not special," she said firmly. Alexander tilted his head. "I didn't say you were." That caught her off guard. Then he continued, "I said you're honest. In a world where everyone calculates their words around me, you don't." She looked away slightly. "That's not my problem." "I know." Another pause, then softer. "That's why it's refreshing." The moment she almost lets go. For a brief second, Vivian didn't respond. She just sat there, still, then quietly said, "You're dangerous." Alexander smiled slightly. "Because I invite you to lunch?" "No." She looked at him. "Because I'm starting to forget why I shouldn't be here." That landed, harder than either of them expected. The air shifted. Not dramatic, but real. Control returns. Too late, Vivian stood suddenly. "I should go." Alexander nodded. Of course, no resistance, no chase, just acceptance. That annoyed her slightly. She grabbed her bag, then paused, looked at him. "Stop calling me for lunch." He smiled. "I didn't call you today." She frowned. "Don't start calling me for lunch." "I'll try." She narrowed her eyes. "That's not reassuring." He chuckled. "I know." Final moment, as she turned to leave, he said softly, "Dr. Vivian." She stopped, didn't turn fully. "Yes, thank you for coming." She hesitated, then replied, "Don't read meaning into it." He smiled faintly. "I won't." But neither of them believed that fully. Lagos moved loudly again. Cars, noise, heat, life. But Vivian stood still for a moment before getting into her car. She exhaled slowly, then muttered to herself, "This is how people start losing focus." A pause, then softer. "And I am not supposed to be one of those people." Inside the restaurant, Alexander watched her leave again, and for the first time, he didn't smile immediately, because he realized something quietly unsettling. This wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was becoming something heavier. Something neither of them had agreed to. Something that didn't ask permission. And worse, something that was already growing. Vivian did not sleep well that night. Not because of stress from surgery. Not because of hospital emergencies. But because of something far more annoying. A conversation she kept replaying in her head. "Because I'm starting to forget why I shouldn't be here." She turned in bed. Vivian, focus," she muttered, then turned again. Focus on patients, not billionaire lunch meetings. But sleep didn't fully cooperate. Morning, that felt different again. The next morning she arrived at the hospital earlier than usual. Again. And this time she noticed something she didn't like. She was waiting. For something. Or someone. She frowned immediately. No, absolutely not. A nurse greeted her. "Good morning, doctor. You look tired." Vivian replied quickly, "I am medically functional." The nurse blinked. "Okay, doctor." The boy's progress. At the recovery ward, the boy was sitting up slightly, weak, but aware. His eyes slowly followed Vivian as she approached. "Doctor," he whispered. Vivian paused. That alone softened something in her expression. "Yes," she said gently. "You're still alive." The boy nodded slowly. "Thank you." She adjusted his chart. "Thank me by recovering properly. Don't waste hospital resources." A faint smile appeared on his face. "Okay, doctor." She turned away quickly, because for a second, her chest felt too quiet. The call that shouldn't have come so early. As she stepped out of the ward, her phone rang again. She stared at it, already knowing. She answered. "Dr. Vivian." Alexander's voice came through. "Good morning." She exhaled. "It's too early for your presence." A soft laugh. "I take that as a greeting." "No, that was a complaint." "Still noted." She rolled her eyes. "What do you want today? Lunch? Breakfast? Emotional stability report?" He paused slightly, then said, "I wanted to ask if you're okay." That made her stop walking, just briefly. "I'm always okay," she replied automatically. "I know," he said, "but I still wanted to ask." Silence. That answer didn't have anything to argue with, and that annoyed her. A hospital interrupts feelings again. "Doctor." Another emergency. Vivian immediately switched. "Not now," she said into the phone. She hung up, and without hesitation, moved. The emergency that tried to reset everything. A young woman had been brought in after a severe road accident. Multiple injuries, internal bleeding suspected. Vivian was fully herself again, focused, sharp, controlled. "Prepare theater, cross-match blood, call ortho and neuro teams." Her voice filled the ER like command code. No emotions, no distractions, only precision. One nurse whispered, When Dr. Vivian enter emergency mode, even emotions go fear her. But something was slightly off. Even while operating, something subtle lingered. A quiet part of her mind, not loud enough to distract, but present enough to notice. Alexander. She frowned internally. No. She focused harder. Scalpel, clamp, suction, but she pushed it away. After surgery. Silence. Hours later, the patient stabilized. Another life saved. Another victory. Vivian removed her gloves slowly. She should have felt normal, satisfied, but instead, she felt slightly restless. She walked back to her office, closed the door, and finally allowed herself a moment of silence. The unexpected visitor. Knock. She frowned. Come in. A nurse opened the door slightly. Doctor, Mr. Cole is here. Vivian closed her eyes briefly. Of course he is. This man does not believe in scheduling. The hospital corridor meeting Alexander wasn't in a suit this time either. Casual, calm, leaning slightly against the hallway wall like he had been waiting for a while. You're avoiding my calls, he said. Vivian crossed her arms. I am working. I know. Pause. Then he added, I came to apologize. That surprised her. She blinked slightly. For what? For distracting you. She scoffed. You think you are a distraction? He smiled faintly. I think I might be becoming one. That line hung between them longer than expected. Vivian pushes back, as always. She recovered quickly. Then stop. He nodded. I could. A pause. Then, but I don't want to. Vivian stared at him. Mr. Cole. Alexander, he corrected softly again. She exhaled. Alexander, this is not a place for whatever you think this is becoming. He didn't argue. Instead, he said quietly, I know. That was worse, because he wasn't denying it. He was acknowledging it. The dangerous calm between them. For a moment, neither spoke. Hospital noise continued around them. Life continued. But between them, time felt paused. Then Alexander said, I'm not asking you for anything. Vivian narrowed her eyes. That's usually when people start asking the most. He smiled slightly. Then I'll be careful. She shook her head. You are already not careful. He didn't deny it. The almost goodbye that isn't goodbye. Vivian stepped forward slightly. This is a hospital, not a meeting place. I know. Then stop coming here for no reason. He looked at her calmly. I have a reason. She crossed her arms. What reason? A pause. Then, you. Silence. Instant. Heavy. Vivian didn't respond immediately. That wasn't like her. At all. Finally, she said coldly, Don't say things like that again. He nodded. Okay. No resistance. No argument. Just acceptance, which somehow made it worse. He leaves, but not really. Alexander turned to leave, then stopped. Without looking back, he said softly, I'm not trying to disturb your life, Vivian. She didn't reply. He continued, I think your life already did that job. Then he left. Final scene. Vivian stood still in the hallway long after he was gone. Nurses passed by, patients moved around, machines beeped, but she didn't move. Then quietly, almost angrily, she muttered to herself, This is becoming a problem. A pause. Then softer, almost unheard, and I don't know how to stop it without lying to myself. Lagos had a way of making everything feel urgent. But on this particular evening, even the city seemed to slow down, like it knew something important was about to happen. Inside St. Catherine's private hospital, Vivian stood alone in her office. No files open, no calls ringing, just silence. That silence was new and uncomfortable. She stared at the framed quote behind her desk. Discipline saves more lives than emotion. For the first time in years, it didn't feel like truth. It felt like protection. The call she didn't expect. Her phone rang. She didn't check the number this time. She already knew. She answered. Dr. Vivian. Alexander's voice was quieter than usual. I won't take much of your time. She leaned back. That's new. A faint pause. Then I'm leaving Lagos. Silence. Not dramatic, not loud, just heavy. Vivian didn't respond immediately. Then she said carefully, Business? Yes. Another pause, then softer. And I don't know when I'll be back. That should have meant nothing. It should have. The thing Vivian didn't expect to feel. Vivian looked away from her desk. Her voice remained steady. "Safe flight." "Is that all?" he asked gently. She frowned slightly. "What else do you want me to say? I'm not your family." A soft breath on the other end. "I know." Silence again. "Then I just didn't want to leave without saying thank you properly." She tightened her grip on the phone. "That boy is alive. That's your thank you." "No," he said quietly. "That was your skill." A pause. "Then this is different." The crack finally breaks. Vivian closed her eyes briefly, annoyed, at him, at herself, at everything she refused to name. "You're making this unnecessarily complicated," she said. "I think it's already complicated," he replied. Silence. Then softer. "Vivian." Hearing her name like that, without title, without distance, did something she didn't expect. She stood up slowly. "What? I'm glad I met you." That should have been simple, but it wasn't, because it carried weight, emotion, truth. The hospital that didn't matter anymore for a moment. Vivian walked to the window. Outside, Lagos moved like nothing was changing, but inside her, something was. She exhaled. "Don't say things like that." "Why?" he asked. "Because it makes people think there's something to hold on to." A pause. Then his voice came softer than before. "Maybe there is." Silence. Longer this time. He didn't push. She didn't respond. But neither hung up. The almost goodbye. Finally, Alexander spoke. "I should go." Vivian nodded even though he couldn't see it. "Go." A pause. Then, "Take care of yourself, Dr. Vivian." Her throat tightened slightly. "I always do." A faint, almost sad smile in his voice. "I know. That's the problem." Click. The call ended. After he was gone, the silence after the call felt louder than before. Vivian stood still, for a long time. Then she whispered to the empty room, "This is what I wanted." But her voice didn't sound convinced. She looked at her desk, at her files, at her carefully structured life, then quietly admitted, "Is it?" 1 month later, life continued, as it always does. The boy recovered fully, walking, laughing, living again. The hospital thrived. Vivian continued saving lives, perfectly, professionally, efficiently, but something subtle had changed. She laughed a little more easily, paused a little longer sometimes, looked at her phone a little too often. And every now and then, when she passed a quiet moment alone, she remembered a voice. Not loud, not demanding, just warm. Somewhere far away, Alexander stood in a different city, overlooking a skyline that wasn't Lagos. His assistant spoke behind him. "Sir, your schedule for next week? Cancel it," he said calmly. The assistant blinked. "All of it?" He nodded slightly. "Yes." A pause. Then softer. "I need to return to Lagos." The ending that wasn't an ending. Back in Lagos, Vivian finished surgery one evening and removed her gloves slowly. A nurse approached. "Doctor, you look distracted today." Vivian didn't deny it. Instead, she said quietly, "I'm fine." But this time, she didn't sound like she believed it completely. Final scene. That night she stood by her office window again. City lights glowing, heartbeat steady, but thoughts louder than usual. Then her phone rang. Unknown number. She stared at it. Didn't answer immediately, just watched it ring. Then she smiled slightly, small, real, and finally whispered to herself, "Let's see what happens next." Call accepted. And somewhere far away, a man smiled at the sound of her voice returning. Because some stories don't end. They just wait for the next chapter. She chose discipline. He chose distance. But some connections don't fade. They wait. Just when Dr. Vivian finally finds her balance again, he returns. Not alone, not simple, and definitely not the same. A powerful family secret. A woman from his past who refuses to let go. And a life or death case that will force Vivian to choose between her heart and her principles. You said don't start what you can't finish. I didn't. I came back to finish it. But this time, love won't be easy. Trust will be tested. Secrets will be exposed, and one decision could destroy everything they've built. Ready for the next chapter? Like, subscribe, and don't miss part 2, because this story is just getting started.